The deep growl didn't come from the direction she expected, but Ilara, the blind elder of Yakutia, felt it vibrate through the frozen ground, rising through her bones to her very soul. 7 white monsters, she thought, her heart pounding as the dense scent of polar bear mingled with the terror of cornered reindeer tore through the icy air. The blizzard howled, blinding even those with sight, but for her, darkness was merely a familiar veil. Suddenly, a sharp shriek cut through the wind, and Ilara knew. The 300-pound giants had found the flaw in the herd's protection. With the entire village depending on the last reindeer herd and death approaching with every heavy step, she had to do the impossible. Guide the defenseless animals through a labyrinth of unstable ice, where every step was a deadly gamble. But what she didn't yet know was that the greatest danger didn't come from the bear's fury, but from the betrayal of the very land beneath her feet. Ilara felt the icy truth penetrate her bones. It wasn't just the distant roar of the bears, which now sounded like a chorus of thunder, muffled by the snow, but the subtle, treacherous vibration coming from below. A melody of cracks, almost inaudible to common ears, but for her, it was a cry of warning from the earth itself. Her thin lips tightened into a tense line, and she extended her hand, not to touch the air, but to feel the moisture and density of the intensifying blizzard, as if she could see the landscape with her fingertips, mapping each dancing flake. The reindeer, creatures of keen instinct, also sensed the danger. Their hooves, once firm, now tapped the ice with nervous hesitation, and their moans were short, full of contained panic. Ilara could feel the warmth of their close bodies, their panting breath mingling with the icy vapor. She knew that each of those animals was a piece of her village's soul, the promise of food and warmth for the harshest months. To lose the herd would be to condemn her people to hunger and cold, a fate that she, the silent guardian, could not and would not accept. The frozen Lena River, a white expanse that snaked through the landscape, was the only viable escape route. But it was also a labyrinth of invisible dangers. Ilara, with her time-polished wooden staff, tapped the ground, feeling the irregularities of the ice, the small rises and depressions that revealed submerged currents and surface weaknesses. She read the river with her feet, with the tip of her staff, and with the hearing that had sharpened over decades of darkness. Every crack, every murmur of the ice was a word in an ancient language only she understood, a silent warning from nature. The decision to cross the Lena had not been taken lightly. It was a forbidden path, feared even by the most experienced hunters, a calculated risk in a game of life or death. But the bears, with their insatiable hunger and brutal strength, left no choice. Ilara imagined the 7 white giants, each weighing as much as a small car, sniffing the air, their heavy steps breaking the snow and the tundra's silence. She could almost feel their warm, predatory breath on her neck, the scent of their thick fur and the wild instinct that drove them to the hunt. A young reindeer, startled, slipped and fell, scraping the ice with a sharp sound that made Ilara stiffen. She turned in the direction of the sound, her ears catching the animal's panic and the concern of the others, who huddled around the calf. "Calm, my little one," she murmured, her hoarse but firm voice a soothing melody amidst the chaos, a reminder that hope still pulsed. She knew that fear was as dangerous as cracked ice. She needed to remain calm, not just for herself, but for the entire herd that depended on her silent courage and unwavering faith. Her heart, despite her age, beat with renewed strength, driven by a deep love for her people and for those creatures that represented life itself. She raised her face to the blizzard, feeling the icy flakes on her wrinkled skin, a cold caress that connected her even more to the vastness of Yakutia. There was no time for despair. There was only the present, the next step, the next vibration of the ice to be deciphered. Ancestral wisdom, woven into her spirit like the threads of her own life, whispered secrets to her about the land, about resilience, and about the delicate dance between life and death. She didn't see the danger, but felt it with every fiber of her being, and this perception was sharper than any sight. The betrayal of the land was real, but the strength of her spirit was even more powerful, a beacon of hope in the icy darkness. Ilara moved with a deliberate slowness, each step a careful study of the ground beneath her feet. Her staff, more than a support, was an extension of her will, tapping gently on the ice, testing its thickness, searching for the fissures her superhuman hearing had already mapped. The reindeer, like a living, warm shadow, followed her closely, their sturdy bodies forming a wall against the biting wind. They trusted her, a silent ancestral trust, which Ilara felt as a sacred weight on her shoulders. She could hear the groaning of the ice beneath their hooves, a sound that to others would be merely the echo of the cold. But for her, it was the erratic breath of a sleeping giant about to awaken. The blizzard was now a dense white veil, covering the world in an icy shroud. Ilara felt the snowflakes on her face, the moisture accumulating on her fur garments, but her mind was clear, focused on the dangerous melody of the river. The bear's growls, previously distant, were now sharper, a menacing crescendo that seemed to come from all directions. She imagined them, their dilated nostrils sniffing the herd's warm trail, their small, cunning eyes gleaming in the storm's gloom. Time was running out, and with each second, the margin of error dwindled. Ilara stopped abruptly, raising her staff. A momentary silence fell among the reindeer, who also stopped, sensing the change in the air. Her ears, trained by decades of darkness, caught a different sound, a deep, continuous vibration that didn't come from the bears, but from the ice itself. It was a murmur, a subterranean lament, indicating an area of extreme fragility ahead. Instinct, more than any sight, screamed at her to change course. It was the voice of the earth, speaking directly to her soul. With a firm gesture of her staff, Ilara veered to the left, forcing the herd to follow a more winding path, but one she knew to be safer, at least for now. Some reindeer hesitated, their hooves slipping on the treacherous surface, but the pressure of the group and Ilara's calm presence urged them on. She could feel the tension in her muscles, the fatigue that was beginning to weigh on her bones, but the image of her village's hungry faces, especially the children's, was a fire burning in her chest, warming her against the relentless cold. With each step, Ilara saw the ice map in her mind, constructed from sounds, vibrations, and memories of past winters. She remembered the stories told by her grandparents about the Lena, a river of unpredictable temperament, capable of freezing into a fortress and the next moment opening into deadly abysses. Her blindness, which many saw as a weakness, was, in fact, her greatest strength, allowing her to perceive nuances that eyes could not grasp. She was the bridge between the visible and invisible worlds, the guardian of knowledge that transcended mere sight. The growls grew louder, and a rancid scent of bear, now unmistakable, wafted through the blizzard. They were too close. Ilara gripped her staff, her heart pounding, but without faltering. The lives of her people, the future of her village, depended on her courage. She would not allow fear to dominate her. With her head held high, she continued to guide the herd, a beacon of determination in the white immensity, knowing that the next test of the ice would be the most dangerous of all, and that with each step she was defying nature itself. Ilara felt the air vibrate with intensity, not just the blizzard's howl, but a deep tremor coming from below. The ice, which had previously murmured, now groaned, a guttural sound from the depths of the Lena. Her ears, sharp as blades, caught the melody of disaster, fissures turning into cracks like veins opening beneath the frozen earth's skin. The bear's growls, a deafening chorus, seemed to urge the ice to give way beneath their feet. The reindeer, previously compact, scattered in panic. Their hooves slipped and clattered on the thin ice with desperate sounds, moans of terror mingling with the growing sound of cracks. Ilara felt the ground tremble violently beneath her staff, a clear warning that the point of no return had arrived. She could see the scene in her mind, the ice breaking into blocks, the icy waters of the Lena River swallowing the animals. A cruel fate she could not allow. With a hoarse cry, barely audible in the storm, Ilara extended her staff forward, not to tap, but to point with certainty. "To the right! Quick!" she commanded, her voice laden with urgency that the animals, by ancient instinct, understood. There was no easy path there. She indicated a more precarious and narrow route, where the ice seemed more unstable, but which her senses told her was the only chance. The straight path, which seemed safer, was a deadly trap, an abyss about to open. The reindeer, driven by panic and blind trust in their guardian, veered sharply, pushing against each other. Ilara felt the ice beneath her feet crack and sink slightly, a shiver. A piece of ice broke off near her, revealing the darkness of the water below, a cold that sucked life. She stumbled, but regained her balance with effort, her staff firmly planted in the ice. Her muscles ached, her body trembled from cold and exertion, but her mind was focused on the deadly dance of the ice and the lives of her people. She could hear the incessant sound of reindeer hooves clattering on the ice, some slipping and recovering, following the desperate route she had charted. With each step, Ilara used her superhuman hearing to map the invisible cracks, predicting the next point of collapse, guiding the herd with millimeter precision, defying logic. She was the living compass, the light in the darkness, the only hope. The growl of a bear sounded dangerously close. Ilara felt the strong, rancid scent of the predator, unmistakable, mingled with the smell of salt and ice. They were just meters away. But Ilara's focus was entirely on the ice, on the life pulsing beneath her feet, on the promise of the future. She knew that this was the decisive moment, needing to be faster and more cunning than nature in its icy fury. With a final effort, Ilara urged the reindeer forward, feeling the ice give way even more beneath her own weight. A silent sacrifice. She knew she was sacrificing her safety, choosing the most dangerous path for herself, to ensure the herd had the best chance of survival. With each step of the herd, she felt the fragility of life and the strength of resilience in her people. Through her blindness, she saw the true vision, the courage of the heart and the ancestral connection to the land. She was the guardian, and she would not fail. The future of her people depended on it, a weight she carried. Ilara felt the ice beneath her feet groan in protest, a death song that resonated deep in her bones. It was no longer an isolated crack, but a symphony of deep cracks, as if the earth itself were tearing apart. The path she had chosen for herself, the most precarious, revealed its fury. Every fiber of her being screamed for caution. Time was a relentless enemy, and the deep growls of the bears vibrated in the icy air, growing closer, urging her on. The reindeer, terrified, huddled together, stumbling, but following the elder. Ilara extended her staff to feel the ice's vibrations, like a conductor leading an invisible orchestra of dangers. She saw with her soul, the fissures opening, the ice plates shifting, revealing the abyssal darkness of the water. The cold rising from the depths was a constant reminder of life's fragility and the urgency of her mission. Her breath was ragged, but her mind was sharp, focused on survival. Altruism, a flame in her chest, warmed her against Yakutia's icy desolation. A deafening crash echoed, and Ilara felt the ground give way violently beneath her feet. A piece of ice broke off to her right, taking a young reindeer with it. The animal's desperate shriek was silenced by the icy waters. Ilara's heart clenched in pain, but there was no time. With a cry of command, her voice hoarse and full of ancestral authority, she struck her staff on the ice, pointing forward to an area that, though it seemed equally treacherous, her senses told her was the only possible passage. It was a narrow corridor between two large cracks, a thread of hope in a sea of despair. The reindeer, sensing the urgency in her voice, ran, their hooves clattering with frantic rhythm. The blizzard howled, transforming the world into a white blur. Ilara felt the biting wind on her wrinkled face. Her muscles were tense, each step a battle against the slippery ice and fatigue. The image of her people's faces, the children's laughter, propelled her. Her human connection was her anchor. The bear's growls intensified, accompanied by heavy footsteps breaking the ice behind them. Ilara knew that with each second the distance dwindled. With a monumental effort, Ilara forced her feet to move faster, guiding the herd through the narrow corridor. She felt the ice vibrate beneath her feet, a premonition of imminent collapse. But she did not falter. Her blindness was her strength. She saw the path with her heart, with ancestral wisdom and the promise of a future. The village's fate rested on her shoulders. She would not fail. The last reindeer passed through the corridor, and Ilara felt the ice behind her collapsed with a thunderous roar, the dark waters swallowing the trail. She had succeeded. By a miracle of instinct and courage, the herd was safe. The journey was not over. Bears and the Lena, with their dangers stretched ahead, a continuous challenge. Ilara stopped, panting, body exhausted but spirit unyielding. She raised her head, feeling the icy wind. A tear of gratitude streamed down. The triumph was bittersweet, but life, she knew, was the sweetest of rewards. She was the guardian, and the tireless watch would continue. Ilara remained motionless for an instant, her entire body trembling not just from cold, but from the adrenaline still pulsing in her veins. The roar of the ice that had collapsed behind them echoed in her ears, a sound of bittersweet victory. She had diverted the herd from a terrible fate, but exhaustion weighed like a mountain on her fragile shoulders. Her knees buckled, and she had to lean on her staff, planting it more firmly in the ice. The blizzard, relentless, whipped her wrinkled face, and the dense scent of bear, though fainter, still hung in the icy air, a constant reminder of the threat. The reindeer, equally exhausted and frightened, panted, their flanks rising and falling rapidly. Others huddled against each other, seeking warmth and safety. Ilara could feel the vibration of their accelerated hearts, the fear still present, but also a faint relief at having escaped the imminent abyss. They had followed her blindly, trusting in her silent leadership, and this trust was what kept her standing, a sacred weight on her soul. She was not just the guardian of the herd. She was the personification of hope for her village, the vital link between present and future. "We cannot stop, my children," she whispered, her hoarse voice barely audible in the wind's howl. The Lena still stretched ahead, a vast and merciless plain of ice and snow, and time was an enemy as cruel as the cold. Ilara knew that the bears, creatures of cunning intelligence and insatiable hunger, would not be deterred by a simple ice collapse. They would find a way to bypass, to flank, to continue their relentless pursuit. With a heavy sigh, Ilara raised her head, feeling the icy flakes on her wrinkled skin. Her superhuman hearing, which had previously mapped cracks and voids, now focused on identifying the next path, the next refuge. She noticed a subtle change in the ice's topography, a gentle rise to the right, where snow had accumulated in soft dunes. It could be a temporary shelter against the biting wind, or perhaps a more stable route, away from the treacherous waters. Ilara began to tap the ground with her staff, each tap a silent question to the frozen earth. Her steps were slow, deliberate, a careful study of the surface. She could feel the difference in the snow's density, The firmness of the ice beneath, that unwavering instinct forged in decades of life in Yakutia, was her only compass. The image of her village's hungry faces, especially the children's, was a fire burning in her chest, warming her against the relentless cold, propelling her with every step. Suddenly, a deep, dragging sound echoed to her left, a sound that was neither ice nor wind. It was the heavy drag of claws across the surface, followed by a deep, guttural growl that made the air vibrate. The bears had found a way. They were bypassing the collapsed ice and now approached from an unexpected flank, their colossal masses breaking the blizzard's silence. Ilara's heart leaped, but her determination did not waver. She gripped her staff, her mind sharp as a blade, seeking the next solution, the next escape route. Triumph was not a choice, it was the essence of her existence, the promise of a future for her people. Ilara gripped her staff with renewed strength, the dragging sound of the bear's claws echoing in her soul like a war drum. They were there, close, and the vision her mind formed was of 7 mountains of white fur, moving with terrifying agility for creatures of such colossal size. The rancid scent of the predators, now more intense, burned her nostrils, mingling with the biting cold of the blizzard. Ilara's heart pounded, but her mind was sharp, seeking the next solution, the next escape route. Triumph was not a choice, it was the essence of her existence, the promise of a future for her people. She turned sharply to the right, pointing her staff towards the gentle rise she had felt moments before, where snow accumulated in soft dunes. Her keen senses told her that, while it might hide traps, it would also offer more irregular terrain, perhaps more difficult for the bears to navigate with their mass. It was a gamble, but the time for hesitation had run out. "This way, my children, quick!" Her hoarse voice cut through the wind's howl, laden with an urgency that the reindeer, exhausted and frightened, instinctively understood. They moved, their hooves kicking up clouds of snow, following the elder with blind faith. Ilara felt the vibration of the ice beneath her feet, but now also the texture of the deeper snow, which offered slightly better grip, but also the threat of hiding fissures. One of the younger reindeer, one with still small antlers, stumbled and fell, its shriek of fear almost inaudible in the blizzard's fury. Ilara, without even looking, extended her staff and touched the animal's flank, urging it to rise. "Get up, my little one, life calls us," she whispered, and the reindeer, as if tapping into an ancestral force, rose and continued to run, propelled by the elder's determination. The bear's growls intensified, and Ilara could distinguish the heavy sound of their paws breaking the crust of ice and snow, growing closer. They were gaining ground. Fear was a cold current trying to infiltrate her heart, but Ilara repelled it with the image of her village's faces, the bright eyes of the children who depended on her. Her human connection was her shield, her beacon. She felt her body exhausted, every muscle burning, but her will was unbreakable. With each step, she used her hearing to map the terrain, identifying the firmer areas beneath the snow, the small valleys and elevations that could serve as natural obstacles for the predators. She guided the herd in a zigzag, a desperate dance against death, using nature's own fury to her advantage. Suddenly, Ilara felt a change in the wind, an icy breath that brought not only the scent of the bears, but also a metallic damp aroma, different from anything she had felt until then on the Lena. It was the scent of open water, of a stretch where the river had not completely frozen, or where the ice had recently broken. Her blind eyes widened. It was a new danger, but perhaps also a chance, an insurmountable barrier for the reindeer, but also for the bears. The decision was urgent, and she needed to be quick. Ilara felt the damp, metallic scent of open water like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just a smell, it was a promise of danger and, perhaps, of temporary salvation. Her ears caught the murmur of the current beneath the ice, a sound most would ignore, but which for her was a three-dimensional map of the river's fragility. The open water meant an icy abyss, a deadly trap for the reindeer, but also a natural barrier against the bear's fury. The decision had to be instantaneous, forged in the heat of necessity and the wisdom of generations. She had no time to hesitate. The predator's growls were now so close that the air seemed to vibrate with their threat, and the rancid scent of the bears mingled with the aroma of the water, creating a symphony of fear and urgency. Ilara turned sharply, pointing her staff to the right, to a narrow strip of ice that seemed to snake between the bank and the open water. It was a dangerous, precarious path, but it was the only one that offered a chance. "This way! Follow me, my children!" Her voice, though hoarse, carried unquestionable authority. The reindeer, sensing the urgency in her voice and the panic in their own hearts, moved with surprising speed, their hooves clattering on the ice with a frantic rhythm. Ilara, in front, felt every vibration, every crack, every change in the ice's texture beneath her feet. She saw the path with a clarity that surpassed sight, guiding the herd with instinctive precision, avoiding the thinner areas where dark water lurked just below. One of the bears, the largest of the pack, let out a deafening roar, a sound of frustration and fury that made the ice tremble. Ilara could feel the vibration of colossal paws pounding on the ice, but now the sound came from behind the barrier of open water. They had reached the obstacle. For a brief moment, the elder felt an icy relief. The water was a dividing line, a natural moat that separated them from the predators. But the relief was ephemeral. The strip of ice they were on was narrow, and with each step, the danger of a reindeer slipping and falling into the icy waters was real. The wind howled, whipping flakes of snow and ice, and the blizzard seemed to want to swallow them whole. Ilara felt her body exhausted, every muscle protesting, but the image of her people's faces, the children's laughter, propelled her. She was the guardian, and the tireless, vital watch would continue. Her human connection was her anchor, the strength that kept her standing against nature's fury. She extended her gloved hand, touching the flank of a young reindeer walking beside her, conveying a calm she barely felt. "We're almost there, my little one," she whispered, a promise she needed to believe as much as the animal. The bears, on the other side of the water, began to move, their colossal silhouettes barely visible in the blizzard. They would not give up. Ilara knew they would seek a narrower point, a way to bypass the barrier. The time they had gained was precious, but limited. She needed to find a refuge, a place where they could rest and regroup before the predators reached them again. Triumph was not just an act of courage, it was an act of profound love, an unwavering commitment to the future of her community. Suddenly, Ilara felt a different vibration in the ice, deeper and more constant, coming from ahead. It wasn't the sound of cracks nor the murmur of the water. It was the sound of earth, of something solid and stable. Her lips curved into a faint smile. It was the opposite bank of the river, or perhaps an island of solid ground in the middle of the Lena. A safe place, a refuge. She quickened her pace, propelled by a new wave of hope, guiding the herd out of the trap of thin ice and open water. The journey was still long, but with each step, Ilara rewrote the destiny of her village, a testament to her unwavering faith and the strength that resided in her courageous heart. The solid ground beneath her feet was a balm to her exhausted soul. It wasn't the final bank, but a vast island of frozen land in the middle of the Lena, covered by a thicker layer of snow and dotted with dark rocks like silent sentinels. The reindeer, feeling the firmness of the terrain, slowed their pace, their tense bodies relaxing a little. A collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the herd. A soft sound Ilara caught with her keen hearing. She stopped, planting her staff in the solid ground, and felt her own knees tremble. Exhaustion was almost unbearable, but the urgency of the situation allowed no rest. The metallic scent of open water still hung in the air, but now it was behind them, a temporary barrier. The bears' growls, however, had not ceased. They echoed from both sides of the island, indicating that the predators were already seeking narrower points to cross the stretch of water, or perhaps bypassing the island entirely. The cunning of these creatures was as fearsome as their strength. Ilara closed her eyes, not to see, but to feel. The island was a refuge, yes, but a surrounded refuge. She could feel the vibration of the ice around the island, the air currents that indicated the proximity of the water and, more importantly, the wind's direction, which carried the increasingly strong scent of the bears. They were approaching, and time was running out rapidly. The young reindeer that had stumbled before nuzzled its muzzle against her hand, a gesture of trust and dependence. Ilara stroked its head, feeling the soft fur and the warmth of its life. "Not yet, my little one," she whispered, her voice laden with momentary sadness, but also with renewed determination. The image of the village children, their small faces waiting for them, was a fire burning in her chest, warming her against the relentless cold. She could not afford to give up. The island offered an advantage. The deeper snow and rocks could hinder the bear's advance, but also limited the reindeer's escape options. Ilara began to walk slowly, tapping the terrain with her staff, seeking an elevation, a path that could lead them to the opposite bank of the river. Her ears caught the sound of the wind whistling through the rocks, creating a sonic map of the island. She noticed that the island stretched for a good distance, and at its farthest end, the murmur of open water seemed to diminish, suggesting that the river might be narrower there, or perhaps the ice thicker. It was a tenuous hope, a calculated risk. The bears' growls grew clearer, and Ilara felt the vibration of their heavy paws on the ice crust around the island. They had found a crossing point. Time was running out. Ilara raised her staff, pointing to the farthest end of the island. "Come on, we cannot stop." Her voice was a command, a plea, a promise. The reindeer, understanding the urgency, began to move again, their hooves kicking up clouds of snow. The elder, with each step, felt the strength of her ancestors, the wisdom of her people, guiding her through darkness and danger. She was the guardian, the bridge between past and future, and her blindness was her greatest vision, allowing her to see the invisible. She saw the fragility of life and the strength of resilience, not with her eyes, but with her heart, with the wisdom woven into her soul. The path was long and treacherous, but each step was an act of love, an unwavering commitment to the lives of her people. Ilara felt her body exhausted, every muscle burning, but her will was unbreakable. She knew that the true battle was yet to come, but with each step, she rewrote the destiny of her village, a testament to her unwavering faith. Ilara felt her body exhausted, every muscle burning, but her will was unbreakable. She knew that the true battle was yet to come, but with each step, she rewrote the destiny of her village, a testament to her unwavering faith. The blizzard's howl seemed to intensify, a chorus of despair, trying to stifle hope. The bears' growls were now at multiple points, coming from the right and left, indicating they had surrounded the island. Ilara could feel the vibration of colossal paws on the ice, a heavy, relentless rhythm approaching rapidly. The rancid scent of the predators was almost unbearable, a constant reminder of the imminent threat. The elder quickened her pace, propelled by a force that came from a deep place in her soul. The reindeer, sensing the urgency in Ilara's every movement, ran with renewed energy, their hooves kicking up clouds of snow. They were a blur of movement in the icy darkness, their bodies slender and agile, yet vulnerable. Ilara guided them towards the farthest end of the island, where the murmur of open water seemed to diminish, a promise of a possible, safer crossing point. As they approached, Ilara extended her staff, tapping the ice with instinctive precision. Her ears caught a symphony of sounds, the rustle of snow, the whistle of the wind, and beneath it all, a subtle, yet alarming sound of ice cracking and groaning. It was not the sound of a superficial crack, but rather that of a deeper, compromised structure. She realized that the most direct path to the opposite bank, which seemed narrower and thus easier to cross, was actually a trap. The ice there was treacherously thin, corroded by subterranean currents, and would give way under the herd's weight. Ilara's heart leaped, but her mind remained clear. She saw the danger with a clarity that sight could never offer. The bears were now so close that she could feel the heat of their heavy breaths, the sound of their claws scraping on the ice, and the deep growl of one of them, which seemed to be just meters away on the other side of the compromised path. They had arrived. The decision had to be instantaneous, forged in the fire of necessity. There was an alternative path, longer and seemingly more dangerous, that snaked to the right, through a stretch of ice that seemed more unstable at first glance, with small rises and depressions. But her superhuman hearing and ancient instinct told her that, though treacherous, it was the only one that offered a real chance. It was the path that would demand the sacrifice of apparent safety in exchange for true survival. "To the right! Quick, my children!" Ilara commanded, her voice hoarse but laden with unbreakable authority. She turned sharply, pointing her staff towards the more difficult path, what seemed like a labyrinth of ice and snow. The reindeer, sensing the panic in the bear's growls and the urgency in the elder's voice, followed her without hesitation, their hooves clattering on the ice with a frantic rhythm. Ilara led, each step an act of faith. The ice beneath her feet cracked and groaned, and she could feel the invisible fissures opening and closing like wounds on the frozen surface. She guided the herd with a delicate dance, diverting them from the most fragile points, using her hearing to map the terrain with a precision that defied nature itself. The bear's growls were now deafening, and Ilara could feel the vibration of the ice beneath her feet, indicating that the predators were pounding on the barrier of the more direct path, frustrated but still determined. Suddenly, a deafening sound echoed across the entire river. The ice of the more direct path where the bears were gave way with a thunderous roar, swallowing the predator's fury into an abyss of icy, dark waters. Ilara felt the shockwave, the tremor of the earth. But she did not stop. That was the climax of her journey, the moment when the lives of her people depended on her inner vision. She had sacrificed the easier path, and now the herd was safe from that trap. True vision resided in the courage of the heart, and Ilara, with her blindness, had seen the impossible. The shockwave of the ice reverberated through Ilara in every bone. The roar of the collapse was followed by abrupt silence, a vacuum that swallowed the bear's growls and the blizzard's howl. A heavy silence, of bitter victory and icy relief. The tremor subsided, the danger had been averted, the bears no longer pursued her. Ilara stopped, her staff planted in the ice, chest heaving. The adrenaline subsided, revealing exhaustion. Muscles protested. In her heart, gratitude and relief warmed her. She had succeeded. She had guided her herd away from the trap, sacrificing the easier path for survival. The reindeer, previously in a panic, slowed their pace. Ilara felt the relaxation in their bodies. The young reindeer nuzzled its muzzle against her hand, a silent thank you. Ilara stroked its head. "We are safe, my little one," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The blizzard continued, less menacing. Ilara raised her head, feeling the icy flakes. Her ears, her eyes, focused on the distant murmur of the riverbank, an invitation to safety. The path ahead seemed firmer. With a heavy sigh, Ilara resumed her march. Each step was an effort, but the image of her village's faces, of the children, was her beacon. She had promised to protect them and had delivered. Altruism was her strength. She guided the herd with deliberate slowness. Her ears mapped the terrain, identifying safe areas, elevations that indicated thicker ice. She felt the growing firmness beneath her feet, the promise of solid ground. The cold was still penetrating, but victory warmed her spirit. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, Ilara felt the unmistakable change. The ice gave way to deeper, softer snow, and beneath it, the solidity of earth. They had reached the bank. A sigh of relief escaped her lips. The reindeer, feeling the same, spread out, exhausted. Ilara planted her staff in the earth, the dry, firm sound a melody to her ears. She couldn't see them, but she knew they were all there. She felt the presence of each one, the warmth of their bodies. The herd was intact. The life of her village was secured. She closed her eyes. A tear streamed down her wrinkled cheek, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude. It had been a journey of terror and despair, but also of courage that defied nature. Her blindness, her greatest strength, had allowed her to see the invisible, the path of resilience. Ilara felt the weight of ancestral wisdom, the voice of her ancestors whispering in the wind. They had guided her, strengthened her. She, the guardian, had fulfilled her mission. The future of her people, the children's laughter, the promise of a new spring, all was safe. Her triumph was the essence of her existence, the legacy. She had saved the animals and the future of her people. Ilara breathed deeply, the icy air filling her lungs with renewal. She had faced the impossible and prevailed. Her body was broken, but her spirit unbreakable. Life pure and resilient had triumphed. Life pure and resilient had triumphed. Ilara felt the firm ground beneath her feet, the soft, deep snow that embraced the Lena River's bank. The blizzard's howl was still strong, but now it seemed a distant lament, an echo of the battle they had fought and won. The reindeer, with their exhausted bodies, spread out along the bank, some lying in the snow, others rubbing their muzzles against each other in a gesture of relief and gratitude. The young reindeer that had followed her so closely came to her, nuzzling its muzzle against her gloved hand. And Ilara felt the warmth of its breath, a breath of life that re-warmed her soul. She knelt slowly, her knees creaking in protest, and embraced the animal's neck, feeling the softness of its fur and the strong beat of its heart. "We made it, my little one," she whispered, and a warm tear mingled with snowflakes streamed down her cheek. It was not a tear of sadness, but of profound and overwhelming gratitude. The journey had been a torment, a test of her faith and strength, but the reward was life, the promise of a future for her people. The way back to the village would be long and arduous, but now it was a path of hope, not despair. Ilara knew that the community would be in a panic, worried about the fate of the herd and her own. The image of the anxious faces, especially the children's, was a beacon that propelled her. She needed to lead them home, to the safety of her village's embrace. With a monumental effort, Ilara stood up. Exhaustion weighed on every muscle, but victory infused her with renewed energy. She raised her staff, pointing towards the village, which her keen senses already mapped in the blizzard's darkness. "Come on, my children. Home awaits us." Her voice, though still hoarse, carried a tone of triumph. The reindeer, as if understanding the urgency of her call, began to move, following the elder with unwavering loyalty. With each step, Ilara felt the connection to the earth, to her ancestors, to the very essence of life. Her blindness, which had once been a barrier, had become her greatest vision, allowing her to see beyond the visible into the heart of things. She had read the signs of the ice, the murmurs of the wind, the tremors of the earth, with a clarity that surpassed sight. She had trusted her instinct, her ancient wisdom, and her unconditional love for her people. When the first flickering lights of the village appeared on the horizon, Ilara felt a lump in her throat. The scent of wood smoke, The distant barking of dogs, the murmur of human life, all was a symphony of welcome. The villagers, who had spent hours in agony, expecting the worst, rushed to meet the herd and its guardian. Cries of joy and relief echoed through the blizzard, and Ilara felt warm hands on hers, tight embraces, and the emotional weeping of her people. The children, with wide eyes, ran among the reindeer, touching their hooves and antlers, marveling at the return of the animals that were the very life of the village. Ilara felt the small bodies nestling against her legs, their soft faces against her wrinkled hands. She had saved not only the animals, but the future of her people, the children's laughter, the promise of a new spring. That night, while the herd rested safely in the corrals and the village celebrated with a warm meal, Ilara sat by the fire, feeling the warmth on her tired face. She didn't need to see the faces of her people to feel the gratitude and respect in their hearts. Her story would be told for generations, a testament to the strength of resilience, the power of altruism, and the ancestral connection to the land. Ilara, the blind elder, had proven that true vision resides in the courage of the heart, and that even in the icy vastness of Yakutia, hope always finds a way. Ilara, the blind elder, had proven that true vision resides in the courage of the heart, and that even in the icy vastness of Yakutia, hope always finds a way. The days that followed the epic Lena crossing were filled with renewed fervor in the village. The threat of the polar bears had receded, and the herd, though exhausted, was safe and intact. Life pulsed again, stronger and more aware of its fragility and the strength in unity. Ilara, sitting in her place of honor near the communal fire, felt the gentle warmth on her wrinkled face, a welcome contrast to the blizzard's biting cold. Her ears caught the sounds of the village, the murmur of joyful conversations, the laughter of children playing with reindeer calves born before the crisis, the clinking of tools as the men repaired the corrals. Each sound was a melody of life, a testament to prevalence. She didn't need to see their faces to feel the admiration and respect radiating from her. The children came, touching her hands with reverence, asking her to recount the story of the groaning ice and roaring bears again. Ilara, with infinite patience, narrated the events, but always emphasized not her own bravery, but the silent courage of the reindeer, the wisdom of the ancestors who guided her, and the unbreakable strength of the community. "It wasn't just me, my little ones," she would say, her voice soft but firm. "It was all of us. The strength of one is small, but the strength of many, united by a purpose, is capable of moving mountains of ice." The story of Ilara and the herd became a living legend, told and retold, not just as a tale of heroism, but as a life lesson. The village youth, once complacent with routine, now looked at the icy vastness with new respect, understanding the interconnectedness of everything and the importance of every life. They learned that true wealth was not in possession, but in preservation, sharing, and the resilience of the human spirit. The village, previously focused on daily survival, began to plan for the future with a broader vision, thinking about how to protect the herd and themselves from future threats, not just with strength, but with wisdom and cooperation. Ilara, in her moments of solitude, felt a deep peace. The journey had been exhausting, but it had reaffirmed her faith in life and the power of love. Her blindness, which might once have been seen as a weakness, had revealed itself as a blessing, sharpening her other senses and allowing her a perception of the world that eyes could not reach. She had seen the river's soul, the ice's fragility, the animal's urgency, and the invisible force that united her people. The winter was still long, but the darkness seemed less oppressive. With each sunrise, however weak and pale, the village saw a new beginning. The human connection, Ilara's altruism, the justice of having the herd back, the overcoming of an almost insurmountable challenge, all wove a new tapestry of hope. Ilara was the personification of this hope, a beacon of resilience in a world of ice. She knew that life in Yakutia would always be a battle, but now they had a story, a legacy that would remind them that together they could face any merciless tyrant the winter sent their way. Her inner vision, the courage of her heart, had illuminated the path for all, an eternal testament that true strength resides in the soul.